Hey there, everybody. Welcome. This is Trevor Crow. The show is Trevor and Friends. You're listening on WGCH. We will be posting all of this on Substack, YouTube, and Spotify eventually. Now, I am lucky enough to have Luke Bronin on the show today. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks, Trevor. Great to be with you.
Great to see you. Luke is a former mayor of Hartford. He's a Yale law professor. He served in Afghanistan. I don't know why I didn't know that until I started reading up on you this morning. He also served the Obama administration as Assistant Secretary of Treasury for terrorist financing. Very interesting. But most importantly, today, Luke Bronin is a Democratic. He's primarying John Larson, who is a 14-term U.S. representative from District what, Luke?
First District, Connecticut's
First
First
District.
District. Yeah.
So, Luke, why are you running? Why is this important to you?
Yeah. Look, let me say at the start, I have a tremendous amount of respect for John Larson. I've known him for a long time. I've worked closely with him. He's been in Congress for almost 30 years. And I think this is a moment we have to start getting some new energy in our Democratic Party. And we need new voices, new perspectives in Congress. And I think it really matters. I think this is a moment when the job of being a member of Congress isn't about, what subcommittee you're sitting on. It's not about, who have you known for the last 30 years that you're talking to in the cloakroom. It's what are you doing to build a different kind of political movement in this moment? It's what are we doing to rebuild a Democratic Party that a lot of people lost faith in? And so I think the job of being a member of Congress is as much outside the walls of the Capitol as inside. And I think it really, really matters that we take that seriously. One of the things we saw last summer with President Biden was that, as a party, we were not so great at looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, hey, it's time to make some changes. And I think we are weaker, not stronger as a Democratic Party because we have so many people who've been there for decade after decade after decade. Instead of getting that renewal that's healthy for any organization, but certainly for our politics.
Absolutely, Luke. I couldn't agree with you more. And what I do think we need is that bright, young, really ambitious, thoughtful, creative energy. And I know that you can bring this to this race. Are you bringing it to this race, but also to the U.S. Representatives? One of the things that I've really noticed and enjoyed about watching your campaign pick up speed. And by the way, you are out funding your competitor, your John Larson himself by like almost three quarters, I believe. You're at 1.5 cash in hand, and he's like 900 or half, at least a half. So good for you on that one. And yeah, we need some new leadership, and I love seeing that. So let's jump into some of the big topics right now. And one of your videos that I was really riveted by was what you said about ICE. Talk to us about that.
Well, I think a lot of things. I mean, first of all, I think at this point it's very clear that ICE just needs to be abolished and we need to start over. And it's important to remember that ICE has only existed since 2003. If ICE was a person, it would not be old enough to rent a car. It would barely be old enough to buy a beer. And so the idea that you need this particular agency that is violating our civil liberties daily and engaging in shocking acts of cruelty daily, the idea that you need that organization to do immigration enforcement flies in the face of hundreds of years where we did immigration enforcement before ICE existed. And I think in this moment, Democrats are absolutely right to put a really strong, to take a really strong, clear stand, say at a bare minimum in this moment, no more masks, no more warrantless arrests and warrantless searches and seizures, no more racial profiling, and real accountability, both in the form of body cameras and actual independent investigations. And I think that should not be a controversial proposition in the United States of America. The idea that law enforcement needs to respect our Constitution should not be a Democratic Party idea or a progressive or liberal idea. That's an American idea, and it's a basic principle.
Very important to point that out. And yeah, that we are seeing a radical just running over constitutional rights from First, Second, Fourth Amendment, 15th Amendment. I'm
Yep.
kind of losing count of what's going on out there. And even seeing what happened after Alex Pretty was executed on the roads of Minneapolis, that even the NRA was like, hold on a minute. People, he had the right to carry a gun. He was not brandishing it. And you have a right, Second Amendment, right? And I'm not a gun owner, but there's so many things here that I cannot get my head wrapped around. What is happening with this administration?
I think what's happening with this administration is that they really believe that they can create any reality they want and no one will question them. And you see that time and again, right? They call January 6 insurrectionists patriots. They call,
Mm.
uh, the people who are peacefully observing domestic terrorists. And they believe that they can create any reality they want, but fortunately, the American people are not fools, and I, I think that this response to the Alex Preddy murder just demonstrated how little respect the Trump administration had for the American people, because what they were saying was so clearly contradicted by the evidence you could see with your own eyes, and they were shameless in lying about it. And that's why I think a lot of Americans who maybe were sympathetic to Trump to begin with looked at that and said, show me the respect of not lying to my face. And as you said, it was pretty bizarre for the Trump administration, speaking, for the Republican Party to basically say that the fact that a lawful permitted gun owner was in possession of a weapon was justification for his execution on the streets. It was shocking to everybody across the political spectrum. And I think we need to be careful not to just sort of assess this in terms of political risks. This is, or in terms of politics. What they're doing is wrong, regardless of the political fallout. But there's a reason that a Democrat just won a
Oh
district
my
that Trump
gosh.
won by 17 points. And it's
It's
because
huge.
Americans are tired of the chaos and the cruelty and the abuse of power, and maybe most of all, the lies.
The lies. Well, okay, Fort Worth, Texas. Thank you. You're stepping out in front of us. So, speaking of domestic terrorists, and one of the things the Trump administration is doing is creating a database of people who are observing, following, etc. And apparently, there's a law coming up for review in Florida that creates a state level of domestic terrorists. They can decide it could be somebody like Indivisible, for example, could be labeled a domestic terrorist organization. So even if you give to an organization like that, and by the way, they're starting to label all Democrats as domestic terrorists, frankly. So I don't even know how to begin around something like that when a state is starting to think about implementing these kind of laws. What do you think of that?
I think it's really scary. And, it's combined. I don't know if you saw in the New York Times this past week that there were multiple confirmed examples of ICE using facial recognition technology to ID people who were protesting or observing and then put them on terrorist watch lists. And your point about designating Indivisible as a domestic terror organization is not it's not a theoretical one. The Attorney General of the United States called Indivisible a domestic terrorist group some months ago. Uh, and I think the idea that federal government or states are going to claim that right is really scary. And I think we need to call it out. We need to stop it. It's also why we need to win, and not just win the numbers, but be out there clearly communicating every single day, everywhere we can, what's at stake.
Now, another one of the sort of things I was looking at and thinking about you because you're commenting on it is Don Lemon getting arrested this past weekend. I believe it was during a church. I don't understand all the entire context, but the ICE or the administration was using specific laws that were supposed to protect civil rights and Black people, and then people entering clinics or places of worship. So, talk
Yeah,
to me more about that.
sure. I mean, I think this is a pretty remarkable thing. First of all, the fundamental issue is that the Trump administration is prosecuting journalists for doing what journalists are supposed to do. Don Lemon was not there as a protester. He was not disrupting the church service. He was observing what was happening. He was interviewing people who were in the church worshiping. He was interviewing people who were protesting. The idea that the administration is going to prosecute journalists for observing things that are happening is a direct assault on First Amendment rights and should have every American concerned, no matter where you sit on the political spectrum. But as you say, there was something, sort of twisted about the particular way they prosecuted. One, they used two laws. One was a law that was passed originally after the Civil War to protect Black Americans against the violence of the KKK. And it's a law that has a history of being used to protect civil rights, including after the Mississippi burning cases. And the other law that they used is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, the FACE Act, which does have provisions about protecting against the interruption, or through threats or obstruction of people worshiping in place of worship. So there is a provision of that. But the point is that this is a statute that opponents of reproductive freedom and of abortion rights have for many years hated and sought to overturn. They tried to get the
Mm.
Supreme Court to overturn it. They couldn't. So the administration took these two statutes that were intended to protect civil liberties, and they've used it to go after somebody for exercising their First Amendment rights, who happens to be a Black American, and another who happens to be a woman and a Black American, right? And
I think everybody they arrested this past weekend were
yeah,
Black Americans.
and I do think that this is an administration that sends messages deliberately, that uses symbols
Hmm.
intentionally, and that engages with particular audiences knowingly. And so I think that this wasn't an accident, that it was those statutes they used. And I do think they probably took particular pleasure in
I'm
using those
sure.
statutes in this case. And again, I don't want to, the core issue is the attack on journalism. And this
Mhm.
is just the latest example, right? This is not like it's an isolated example of going after journalists or people you know, who are protected by or should be protected by the First Amendment. But it's a pretty stunning example.
It's an incredible perversion. So we're going to talk about perversion in a minute. But before we move from journalism, I want to ask you, because you've been on Newsmax lately, what is it for you? You're a pretty strong Democrat, maybe a little progressive, somewhere in the middle. What's it like for you to be on a strongly conservative channel and discuss your thoughts and values?
I think it's really important. You know, Newsmax is as far right as you get. Actually, now there are probably station channels or platforms that are even farther right, but Newsmax is pretty damn far right. And I think a lot of what they amplify is some of the most disgusting stuff in our political discourse, and a lot of misleading or stuff or misinformation even. But to me, that's all the more reason why we have to go in and contest those spaces. I don't think
Mm,
Democrats can leave places uncontested, because when you do that, then you leave the lies uncontested. And and I think we've seen a number of examples recently of the fact that people who have been strong Trump supporters, strong MAGA supporters, folks like Joe Rogan are
hmm.
actually moving on some
It's
of these
moving a
issues.
little.
And so I might disagree with somebody, or somebody might disagree with me on 95% of issues or 99% of issues. But if we stop giving up on the idea that we should be laying out our case and making a strong argument and rebutting lies, then we're giving up on a really important part of what it means to be a democracy and engage in political discourse. And so I actually think it's really important for us as a Democratic Party to go in with clarity, with courage, not take BS, not be cowed, also not scream and yell, but go in
Right.
real, clear, strong arguments that maybe have a chance of planting a little seed of doubt with somebody who's watching and say, man, maybe I didn't really sign up for this.
There will be a little seeded doubt, but I really like what you're saying. And it's incredibly important that we do step into spaces that people disagree with us in a way that we can say what we see and what they are seeing too. You can't unsee what happened
Right.
to Alex Pretty. You cannot listen to the lies that this guy was
Right.
going to be a mass assassin and all sorts of garbage.
Exactly.
So if you are one of the two or three voices that show up on Newsbacks, thank you for doing that. But it does take courage. I give you credit.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, look, what you just said is one of the things I said when I went on in that particular show, was to say, listen, I know you don't agree with me if you're watching this show, but go watch the video
Mm-hmm.
and then watch what the Trump administration said about it,
Mm-hmm.
and believe what your eyes are telling you, not what their lies are telling you. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to just keep shining a light on and hammering away at.
Yeah, just be really, really clear. Okay, moving, because we used the word perversion at one point, Epstein files and how many people that are connected to this administration have been labeled and are in these different ways and different aspects, some pretty innocuously and then others in an incredibly horrendous way. Everybody from Steve Bennett. I feel like anybody's connected has somehow landed on these things. But what's your take on this, and what would you do with it if you were elected? Where would you go with all of this information?
I I would start with the fact that let's for a second take the politics out of this and just say this was a horrific extended series of crimes and rape and sexual abuse, and the fact that there has been so little accountability for that, and so few people paying the price for that, and so many victims who have been denied justice because of that. That's the real problem here. Now, this has become a political problem for the Trump administration because they are so clearly trying to protect the president, Steve Bannon, everybody in that circle who is implicated here. And it is obvious to anybody who's paying attention that they've done everything possible to keep information from coming out about this. But I really do think in this conversation, it's important to start not with the, political, again, not with the political
I
dimension of this,
agree.
but with the
Mhm.
basic fact that this was a horrific series of crimes that many people were aware of, that nothing was done about, and that there has been nowhere close to the justice that the victims deserve.
Absolutely agree with you. And this is, these crimes spanned, I think, five presidencies, and they're everybody on every side of the political spectrum has been many people on Democrat, Republican, et cetera. But I think the thing that upsets me most is again these people who believe they can get away with anyway, and that anything, and that would be our oligarch class. So I'm going to circle back to one of the things you said in your video, which, by the way, if you haven't watched Luke's new video, he just put it up on his social media. But he's saying being in the middle class shouldn't be so hard, right? That there's got to be a way that billionaires don't get tax cuts, but there's ways to live in the middle class. We're this Epstein class, if you will. I'm not saying every billionaire out there has participated in this kind of depravity, but we do have a situation in our country where there are large chunks of people with incredible wealth who are not paying their fair share. What would you do to change that?
I think that one of the worst consequences of the Trump administration has been that they have been very blatant, very brazen, and very open about their view that there are people who are above the law. The president first among them. I mean, he places himself above the law. He placed January 6 rioters above the law. He places anybody who pays him or his affiliated entities enough money above the law by selling pardons.
The
This is a
Supreme
president.
Court did grant him
The Supreme
immunity.
Court granted him immunity, and he has now essentially sent a message to anybody who does illegal acts on his behalf. You'll be protected because I'll give you immunity through the pardon power. And so I think what you're describing is part of a really deep and one of the biggest problems we face right now, which is that we have a president who truly believes that he is above the law and can put other people above the law. And it is the most un-American, anti-American idea imaginable. And I think you're right that it is very much intertwined with the fact that there are people and industries that are spending enormous amounts of money to buy influence, and it's paying off for them because you have a president who is not shy about doing favors for cash. There have been countless examples of it, but this is a president who is all about pay to play, is very open in getting benefits to himself or his family in return for political favors, including putting people above the law with pardons.
It's unbelievable. Okay, Lisa Hannick, our executive producer, has been dying to ask you a question. She's sitting next to me with her dog.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Lou. Thanks for coming on. You talked about it already, Trevor. I was going to talk about what we do to call out the lies that we see in the media. So you address that really well.
Yeah, so important, and we can't stop saying that. Yeah, so the level of corruption is really impressive. I believe the president has enriched himself by the tune of $1.4 billion since the beginning of his administration.
Yeah, I mean, there's another analysis that suggests it's as high as 4 billion.
Oh,
yeah.
goodness. And his children who have done deals with Liberty, whatever the crypto they have, that
Yep.
these Saudis have bought into the sovereign fund, put in like a couple billion in there, pumped up that crypto to keep it afloat. It's just endless, endless, endless. And people say to me, but Hunter Biden? I'm like, people,
Yeah.
by Hunter Biden, I'm so, terrible, not okay. This is to another degree, another level of just
Yeah.
insanity.
No, we're seeing corruption at scale. We're seeing corruption as a system. We are seeing the complete breakdown in in all of the norms and the respect for our basic traditions of public service. And I think that's one of the things that is going to be hardest to repair.
I agree.
When you lose that kind of trust and that sense that public service and public office is a profound responsibility, and it's not for the purpose of enriching yourself. That's a disease that can get deep into a country and into politics. And I saw that. I was on the anti-corruption task force in Afghanistan. I would say I was not in combat. I was there as an intelligence officer. I served on the anti-corruption task force, and I saw what happens when a country gets taken over by that disease of corruption. And a few people benefit, the public loses all trust, and everybody gets hurt. And repairing that is not easy. And I think that's going to be one of the most important things we have to do when we get majorities back and ultimately win the presidency back.
I truly hope so because Trump's calling to nationalize all voting.
Ugh.
So if this were to occur, we will not have actual elections and no more fair elections. And literally everybody I talk to who has lost an election is like, hey, it was rigged. I even the other day, I was talking to a local person whose friend lost an election by a few votes and said, oh, it was all rigged. And what can we do to repair that? Everything from the corruption all the way down. And to your point is when internationally our country is now just another corrupt place, we don't have people investing in our country anymore. We don't have the same kind of just support and belief in who we are as a nation. And this is where we've gotten to, and it's absolutely appalling. It just makes me cringe. And I don't know. We need young, strong, democratic leaders who are going to come up and clean up this mess.
I agree.
You got some pretty serious endorsements over the weekend, and in the New York Times, a very nice article. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate you mentioning those. There were a few organizations that endorsed my campaign last week, and one of them is Vote Vets, which is an organization that exists to support veterans. It's done a lot of support for post 9/11 veterans, and I think they've helped get some of the strongest, most effective voices in the Congress elected. And so I'm really proud and humbled to get their support. And there are two other organizations too. One is called The Bench. One is called New Politics. Both of them are very much focused on lifting up a new generation of Democratic leaders. And I think both of them recognize what we were talking about at the start, that we would be stronger as a party if more people saw it as a part of leadership to know when it's time to pass the torch. And the bench, the purpose is in its name, right? It's developing the bench for the Democratic Party, for the next generation of leaders. And that's a trio of organizations that I'm really grateful for their support. But I think that it means a couple things. I mean, one, it means people are starting to take notice of this race. There are a lot of races in the country where people are making the case for generational change. I hope one of the differences in this race is, one, we're building a campaign that really can win. I mean, we're building a strong campaign that's ready to do everything we need to do. And two, I hope that I bring to this race and would bring to Congress a set of experiences that go beyond saying new energy and new generation. I with all respect to John Larson, for the last 30 years, he's been a congressman and only a congressman. And, I've led a city through some of its most challenging times over an 8-year period, served in uniform, did national security work in the Obama administration, was chief legal counsel to our governor and worked on things like the common sense gun bill that we got passed here in Connecticut. And I hope that set of experiences that allows me to both kind of bring that energy, but also bring some perspectives that may be valuable down there. And I'm grateful that both a lot of supporters and also those groups you mentioned, decided to get involved, hopefully for some of those reasons.
Well, it is one of the things that I do think about, and as much as I adore Ruth Bader Ginsburg and what she did for women and reproductive rights, by not stepping down, we ended up with Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
Which just unwound all of the things that Ruth Bader Ginsburg did. So just as a note to everyone out there, think about how to pass that torch. Think about what is your legacy. Do not be a Dianne Feinstein and die basically in office. It really, to do the best we can for the next generation is to hand the torch over. And shows like Succession or whatever, they're very entertaining. But the reality is, right, we have a country here that needs the next gen. And certainly I've really enjoyed watching Mayor Mamdani and his use of social media he's gotten people out to really get involved, and young people. Do you feel like you're energizing that base as well? What do you
I
see
think we're
here?
gonna, yeah, I mean, we're getting a lot of young people who want to get involved, and we're building up a little army, of young Democrats who I think are hungry to get involved. They understand
Mhm.
the stakes in this moment, and they
Mm.
want to see that new energy. I mean, look, I will say I'm not as young as a lot of young Democrats. You look at me from behind, I've got a big old bald spot, but I'm still 30 years younger than my opponent, and I do think there's just a lot of people who want to see that change and see that renewal. Um, and I'll say to anybody listening, if you want to get involved, reach out. We'd love to get you involved.
So
Whatever
where
age
do they
you
find
are,
you? Is
whatever
it
age you are, you can go to broninforcongress.com. That's the campaign website. You can send us an email there or sign up to volunteer. And obviously, lots and lots of ways to help, and be grateful for all of them.
Mhm. Now, are you going to be speaking anywhere if somebody wants to come see you in person? Is there something coming up that
Yeah.
you're going to be?
I mean, right now, sort of doing two. There's nothing particular that comes to the top of my head, but doing two things right now. One is doing the circuit of Democratic town committees,
Mhm.
because
Good.
we've got a convention coming up in May, and so
Uh-huh.
going and talking with all the Democrats who are involved in their local Democratic parties, and then lots of meet and greets, and just in living rooms and kitchens all across the district as often as we can, because
I
I
love that.
try to get in front of as many people as possible and give them a chance to ask any question they want.
So, Luke, we got to end there.
All right.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for
Very,
having me.
very best of luck for you. To you, I look forward to having you back on the show before election time. But everybody
Likewise.
have a great day. This is Trevor Crow. The show is Trevor and Friends. You're listening to WTCH, and the show is brought to you by me, trevorcrow.com.